The cold bit through Tessa Gardner's threadbare dress like 1,000 tiny knives, and the blood from the gash on her temple had already frozen against her skin when she realized her stepfather was not coming back. She lay crumpled in the snow 3 miles outside Georgetown, Colorado, where Frank had thrown her from the wagon after his fists had done their worst, his final words still echoing in her ears about how she was nothing but a burden he no longer intended to carry. The December wind howled through the mountain pass, and the sun was already sinking behind the peaks, turning the world into shades of purple and gray. She tried to move, but pain shot through her ribs where Frank had kicked her, and her left arm hung at an odd angle that made her stomach turn. The snow beneath her was stained red, and she could feel warmth still trickling down her face, which seemed impossible given how cold everything else was. Tessa was 19 years old, and she had survived 3 years with Frank Gardner after he had married her mother in the summer of 1875. Her mother had died that first winter, leaving Tessa alone with a man whose kindness had been nothing but a mask worn for courtship. The real Frank had emerged slowly, like rot spreading through wood, until there was nothing left but cruelty and the smell of whiskey. Today he had finally decided she was more trouble than she was worth, especially after she had refused his advances the night before. She had fought him off with a fireplace poker, and he had promised retribution. She just had not expected it to be this. The sky darkened further, and Tessa felt her consciousness slipping away like water through cupped hands. She thought about praying, but the words would not come. Instead, she thought about her real father, who had died in a mining accident when she was 12, and how he had always told her she was strong enough to weather any storm. She did not feel strong now. She felt like she was disappearing into the white landscape, becoming part of the snow and ice, and maybe that was not such a terrible thing after all. She did not hear the horse approaching until it was almost upon her, the sound of hooves muffled by the snow. She tried to lift her head, but the effort was too much. Through the blur of her vision, she saw a figure dismount, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a heavy coat and a dark hat. Strong hands touched her face, and a voice spoke, rough but gentle, the kind of voice that sounded like it had been worn smooth by wind and weather. "Jesus Christ, what happened to you?" Tessa tried to answer, but her lips would not work properly. The cold had seeped too deep. She felt herself being lifted, and the pain that shot through her body was so intense that darkness finally claimed her completely. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments. Warmth first, blessed and overwhelming, seeping into her frozen limbs with an ache that was almost worse than the cold had been. Then pain, sharp and insistent, in her ribs and arm and head. Then light, flickering and orange, and the smell of wood smoke and something cooking. She opened her eyes slowly, expecting to find herself in hell or heaven or someplace in between, but instead she found herself in a small cabin, lying on a narrow bed covered with thick blankets. A fire burned in a stone fireplace, and a man stood with his back to her, stirring something in a pot hung over the flames. "Where am I?" Her voice came out as barely a whisper, cracked and dry. The man turned quickly, and Tessa got her first clear look at him. He was probably in his mid-20s, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of sagebrush. His face was weathered but handsome, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days of stubble. He wore simple clothes, a flannel shirt and worn trousers, and he moved toward her with an easy grace that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. "You are in my cabin, about 5 miles north of Georgetown," he said, kneeling beside the bed. "I found you on the trail yesterday evening. You have been unconscious for almost a full day. My name is Tyler Northwood." "Tessa," she managed, then winced as pain shot through her head when she tried to move. "Do not try to sit up yet," Tyler said quickly, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You are hurt pretty bad. Your arm is broken, and I think you have got some cracked ribs. That cut on your head took 12 stitches. I am not a doctor, but I have patched up enough injured animals and a few cowboys to know the basics. He paused, his expression darkening. You want to tell me who did this to you? The memory came flooding back, and Tessa felt tears sting her eyes. My stepfather, Frank Gardner. He threw me out of the wagon and left me. Tyler's jaw tightened, and something dangerous flashed in his eyes. Frank Gardner? Tall man, about 50 with a gray beard, runs a feed store in Georgetown? That is him. I know him. He has always struck me as a mean son of a... Tyler stopped himself, took a breath. Sorry, I should not curse in front of you. But a man who would do this to a woman, to his own stepdaughter, that is about the lowest thing I can imagine. He stood and went back to the fire, ladling something that smelled like broth into a tin cup. You need to drink this. You need to get your strength back. He helped her sit up slowly, propping pillows behind her back, and the movement made her gasp with pain. Her left arm was splinted and bound tightly against her chest. When she touched her head, she could feel bandages wrapped around it. Tyler held the cup to her lips, and she sipped the warm broth gratefully, feeling it spread heat through her body. Why did he do it? Tyler asked quietly, sitting in a chair he had pulled close to the bed. If you do not mind me asking. Tessa looked down at the cup, shame burning in her chest. He wanted things from me I was not willing to give. When I refused, he decided I was not worth keeping around anymore. Tyler was silent for a long moment, and when Tessa looked up, she saw fury in his eyes that was tempered by something else, something that looked like pain. I am sorry. No one should have to go through that. You are safe here, I promise you that. You can stay as long as you need to heal. You do not even know me, Tessa said, her voice breaking. Why would you help me? Because it is the right thing to do, Tyler said simply. And because I know what it is like to be hurt by someone who is supposed to protect you. He stood and went to stir the pot again, his back rigid. My father used to beat my mother and me until I got big enough to fight back. Then he just focused on her. She died when I was 17. I left home that same day and never went back. Been on my own ever since, working as a ranch hand, saving money. Bought this place 6 months ago. It is not much, but it is mine. I am sorry, Tessa whispered. Do not be. It made me understand that some people do not deserve the title they are given. Just because a man marries your mother does not make him your father. And just because someone is blood does not mean they will not hurt you. He turned back to her with a slight smile that did not quite reach his eyes. You rest now. I will be right here if you need anything. Over the next several days, Tessa slept more than she was awake, her body demanding time to heal. When she was conscious, Tyler was always nearby, tending the fire, cooking simple meals, checking her bandages with careful hands. He talked to her sometimes, telling her about his life, about the ranch he hoped to build up, about the horses he was training. His voice was soothing, and Tessa found herself looking forward to the sound of it, to the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. On the 4th day, she was finally able to sit up on her own without feeling like she might pass out. Tyler had gone out to tend to his animals, and Tessa took the opportunity to look around the cabin more carefully. It was small but well built, with a single room that served as kitchen, living area, and bedroom. There was a loft above where Tyler had been sleeping, giving her the only bed. The furnishings were sparse but solid, handmade with care. Everything was neat and organized, the mark of someone who took pride in what little they had. When Tyler came back inside, stamping snow from his boots, he found her standing by the window, leaning heavily against the wall. You should not be up, he said, hurrying to her side. I needed to move, Tessa said. I feel like I have been lying down forever. It has only been 4 days. Your body needs rest to heal. I know, but I cannot just lie there anymore. I feel useless. She looked up at him, and for the first time, since he had found her, she really studied his face. He had kind eyes, she realized, the kind that held warmth even when he was worried. You have been so good to me, Tyler. I do not know how I will ever repay you. You do not owe me anything. he said firmly. I did what anyone decent would do. But you gave up your bed. You have been taking care of me day and night. You must have work you need to do. I have been managing. The animals get fed and everything else can wait. He guided her back to the bed, his hand warm on her elbow. You are more important right now. Something in the way he said it made Tessa's heart skip, and she felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the fire. She sat on the edge of the bed, and Tyler knelt to check the splint on her arm. His hands were gentle but sure, and Tessa found herself noticing things she had been too hurt and frightened to see before. The way his hair fell across his forehead, the small scar on his chin, the breadth of his shoulders under his shirt. How long do I have to wear this splint? She asked, partly to distract herself from her thoughts. At least 6 weeks, maybe 8. Broken bones take time. He looked up at her, and their faces were suddenly very close. Does it hurt much? Not as bad as it did. You did a good job setting it. I learned from an old cowboy I worked with. He had broken just about every bone in his body at one point or another. Tyler stood, putting some distance between them, and Tessa felt an odd sense of disappointment. You hungry? I have got some venison stew ready. They ate together, sitting at the small table Tyler had moved closer to the bed. The stew was simple but good, seasoned with herbs Tyler grew in pots on the windowsill. They talked as they ate, and Tessa found herself telling him about her childhood, about her real father and the happy years before he died, about her mother's loneliness that had led her into Frank's arms. She thought she was doing the right thing, Tessa said softly. Thought she was giving us security. She did not know what he was really like until it was too late. I think the grief of realizing her mistake is what killed her more than the fever. That must have been hard for you, being left alone with him. It was. I kept thinking about running away, but I had no money, nowhere to go. And Frank watched me like a hawk. The only time I got to leave the house was to go to church on Sundays, and he was always right there beside me. She pushed her stew around with her spoon. I kept hoping someone would notice, would see that something was wrong, but everyone thought Frank was such a good man, taking care of his poor dead wife's daughter out of the goodness of his heart. People see what they want to see, Tyler said bitterly. They did not want to look close enough to see the truth because then they might have to do something about it. Is that what happened with your mother? Tyler nodded slowly. Everyone in town knew what my father was. They heard her screams, saw the bruises, but he was a successful businessman and she was just his wife. Nobody wanted to get involved in family business. By the time she died, she was so beaten down, she did not even look like herself anymore. He met Tessa's eyes. I swore after she died that I would never turn away from someone who needed help, that I would never be like those people who knew and did nothing. That is why you saved me, Tessa said quietly. That is part of it. Tyler's gaze was intense. But mostly I saved you because when I saw you lying there in the snow, looking so small and broken, something in my chest just cracked wide open. I could not have left you there even if I wanted to. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Tessa felt her breath catch, felt something shift in the space they shared. She had never had anyone look at her the way Tyler was looking at her now, like she was something precious and worth protecting. It was terrifying and wonderful all at once. Before she could respond, Tyler stood abruptly. You should rest more. I will clean up here. That night, lying in the darkness with the fire burned down to embers, Tessa thought about Tyler sleeping in the loft above her. She thought about his hands on her arm, gentle and careful. She thought about the way he looked at her when he did not think she was paying attention, like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. She thought about how safe she felt here, in this small cabin with this man she barely knew, safer than she had felt in 3 years under Frank's roof. She was falling for him, she realized with a start. It was too soon, too fast, too complicated, but it was happening anyway. Tyler Northwood, with his sad eyes and gentle hands, and fierce protectiveness was working his way into her heart without even trying. The thought should have frightened her. After everything with Frank, after the violence and the fear, she should not be able to trust any man. But Tyler was different. She knew it in her bones, in the way he touched her like she was made of glass, in the way he slept in a loft so she could have the bed, in the way he had taken her in without question or expectation of reward. Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Tessa dreamed of gentle hands and sage-colored eyes. The next week passed in a strange, sweet rhythm. Tessa grew stronger each day, able to stay awake longer, to move around the cabin with less pain. Tyler continued to care for her with patient attention, changing her bandages, making sure she ate, helping her when she needed it, but giving her space to do things herself when she could. They talked for hours, sharing stories and dreams and fears. Tessa learned that Tyler wanted to build his ranch into something sustainable, that he loved working with horses more than anything, that he had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh in spite of everything. Tyler learned that Tessa could read and write, unusual for a woman in these parts, that her father had insisted on educating her himself. He learned that she loved winter despite what had happened to her in it, that she had a talent for drawing but had not been allowed to pursue it under Frank's roof. He learned that she was stronger than she looked, that she had a spine of steel under her gentle exterior. "I am going to have to go into Georgetown soon," Tyler said one morning over breakfast. "I need supplies, and I need to let people know you are all right. Someone might be looking for you." Tessa's hand tightened on her spoon. "Frank will not be looking. He wanted me gone." "Maybe so, but there might be other people who noticed you missing. Friends, neighbors." "I did not have friends. Frank did not allow it." Tessa looked down at her plate. "I do not want to go back there, Tyler. I cannot." "I would never make you go back," Tyler said firmly, reaching across the table to cover her hand with his. "But we need to figure out what to do long term. You cannot hide forever, and Frank needs to answer for what he did. No one will believe me. He is a respected businessman. I am just a girl with no family and no money. Who is going to take my word over his? I will stand with you. I will tell them what I saw when I found you, how hurt you were." Tessa shook her head. "It will not matter. And even if they did believe me, what then? Best case, they tell Frank he cannot come near me anymore. But I will still have nowhere to go, no way to support myself." Her voice dropped. "I have been thinking about it. Once I am healed enough, I will need to find work. Maybe as a maid or a cook somewhere. I can earn my keep." Tyler was quiet for a long moment, his thumb rubbing absent circles on the back of her hand. "You could stay here." Tessa's head snapped up. "What?" "Stay here, with me." The words came out in a rush, like he had been holding them back and they finally broke free. "I know it is not proper. I know people would talk, but I do not care about that. You are safe here, Tessa. You could help with the ranch, with the horses. I could pay you wages, or we could be partners, however you want to arrange it. I just—" He stopped, took a breath. "I do not want you to leave." Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she was sure Tyler could hear it. "Tyler, I cannot ask you to do that. You would be risking your reputation, your standing in the community." "I do not have much standing to risk. I am just a ranch hand who bought a piece of land most people thought was too remote to be worth anything. And as for my reputation, I would rather be known as the man who helped someone in need than the man who turned her out because he was worried about gossip." He squeezed her hand. "Say yes, Tessa. Please." She should say no. She should insist on finding her own way, on not being a burden. But when she looked into Tyler's eyes, she saw hope there, and something else, something that made her breath catch. She saw the same thing she was feeling, the pull between them that had been growing stronger with every passing day. "Yes," she whispered. "I will stay." The smile that broke across Tyler's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He stood and came around the table, and before Tessa could think about what was happening, he had pulled her into a gentle embrace, careful of her injuries. She rested her good hand on his chest, feeling his heart beating steady and strong under her palm. "Thank you," he said quietly into her hair. "Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for giving me a reason to trust again." They stayed like that for a long moment, and Tessa felt something settle inside her, something that had been restless and afraid for so long. This was what safety felt like. This was what home felt like. True to his word, Tyler rode into Georgetown the next day, leaving Tessa with strict instructions to rest and not overdo anything. She watched from the window as he rode away, and despite his promise to return, she felt a flutter of anxiety. What if Frank saw him? What if Tyler confronted him and something terrible happened? But she pushed the fears away and instead spent the day exploring the cabin more thoroughly, learning where Tyler kept things, starting to feel like this could actually be her home. She found paper and a stub of pencil in a drawer and spent hours sketching the view from the window, the mountains stark and beautiful against the winter sky. It felt good to draw again, to let her hands create something after so long being forced to keep them idle. Tyler returned just before dark, his saddlebags full of supplies. He looked troubled, and Tessa's heart sank. "What happened?" she asked as he unloaded flour and coffee and other goods onto the table. "I ran into Frank," Tyler said shortly. "Or rather, he ran into me. He was at the general store, holding court with some of the other businessmen. When he saw me, he asked if I had seen his poor stepdaughter, who had run off over a week ago. Said he was worried sick, that she was not in her right mind, that she might hurt herself." Anger flared hot in Tessa's chest. "He is lying. He knows exactly what happened to me because he is the one who did it. I know that. So I told him I had found you half dead in the snow and that you were recovering at my place. You should have seen his face, Tessa." For just a second, he looked absolutely furious before he covered it up with false concern. He demanded to know when he could come see you, make sure you were all right. "No." The word came out sharp and frightened. "He cannot come here, Tyler. Please." "I told him you were not ready for visitors yet, that you needed time to heal. But he is not going to let this go. He is going to keep pushing, and eventually he is going to show up here whether I like it or not." Tyler ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "The problem is, legally he is still your guardian until you turn 21. He could try to force you to come back." "I will not go," Tessa said fiercely. "I would rather die than go back to that house." "It is not going to come to that," Tyler said, coming to stand in front of her. He took her good hand in both of his. "I have been thinking about this all day, about how to protect you, and there is one way that would make you legally untouchable by Frank." "What way?" Tyler took a deep breath. "Marry me." Tessa stared at him, sure she had misheard. "What?" "Marry me," Tyler repeated, his eyes intense and earnest. "If you are my wife, Frank has no legal claim on you anymore. You would be under my protection, and he could not force you to do anything. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but Tessa, I care about you. These past 2 weeks, having you here, getting to know you, it has made me happier than I have been in years. I am not asking you to love me. Not yet anyway, though God knows I am already halfway in love with you. I am asking you to let me keep you safe in the only way I know how." Tessa's mind was reeling. Marriage to Tyler. 2 weeks ago, she had been living in fear and misery. Now she was standing in a warm cabin with a man who was offering her not just protection, but partnership, who looked at her like she hung the moon, who made her feel things she had never thought she would feel. "Tyler, that is not fair to you. You should not have to marry someone out of obligation." "It is not obligation," Tyler said fiercely. "Maybe it started that way in my head, as a practical solution, but the more I think about it, the more I want it for reasons that have nothing to do with Frank or the law. I want to wake up every morning and see you in my home. I want to teach you to ride and to train horses with me. I want to hear you laugh and see you draw and just be near you. If you do not feel the same way, if you only see me as someone who helped you, then I will still marry you to keep you safe, and I will not expect anything from you. But if there is any chance that you might feel even a fraction of what I feel, then please give us that chance. Tessa felt tears spilling down her cheeks. I do feel it, she whispered. I have been feeling it for days now and trying to tell myself I was being foolish, that it was too soon, that I was just grateful to you for saving me. But it is more than that, Tyler. When you are near me, I feel like I can breathe properly for the first time in years. When you touch me, I feel safe instead of afraid. When you look at me, I feel seen in a way I never have before. I do not know if that is love yet, but I think it could be. I think it already is starting to be. Tyler made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms again, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Say yes, he murmured against her hair. Please say yes. Yes, Tessa said, her face pressed against his chest, breathing in the scent of him, leather and wood smoke and winter air. Yes, I will marry you. They were married 3 days later in the small church in Georgetown, with the minister and his wife serving as witnesses. Tessa wore a simple blue dress that Tyler had bought for her in town, and she had washed and braided her dark hair, the stitches in her scalp now hidden by her carefully arranged locks. Tyler wore his best clothes, which were still worn and simple, but he looked handsome enough to make Tessa's heart race when she met him at the altar. The ceremony was short and sweet. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Tyler kissed her gently, reverently, his lips warm and soft against hers. It was Tessa's first real kiss, and she felt it all the way down to her toes. As they left the church, Tessa saw Frank standing across the street, watching them with a face like thunder. Tyler saw him too and pulled Tessa closer, his arm protective around her waist. Frank took a step toward them, then stopped, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. There was nothing he could do now. She was Tyler's wife, beyond his reach, and the look of impotent rage on his face was the sweetest thing Tessa had ever seen. Come on, Mrs. Northwood, Tyler said softly, guiding her toward where their horse was tied. Let us go home. Mrs. Northwood. Tessa turned the name over in her mind as Tyler helped her onto the horse and then swung up behind her, his arms bracketing her body as he took the reins. She was Tessa Northwood now, married to a good man who had saved her life and was now offering her a future. The thought was so overwhelming, she felt tears prick her eyes again. They rode back to the cabin in comfortable silence, and when they arrived, Tyler dismounted and then lifted Tessa down carefully, mindful of her still healing ribs. But instead of setting her on her feet, he kept holding her, cradled against his chest. What are you doing? She asked, laughing. Carrying my bride over the threshold, Tyler said with a grin. It is tradition. We do not have a threshold. We have a cabin door. Close enough. He carried her inside and set her down gently by the fire, which he had banked before they left, but which still gave off a warm glow. Wait here. He disappeared up into the loft and came back down a moment later with a wrapped package. I got you something. I know it is not much, but I wanted you to have a wedding gift. Tessa unwrapped the paper with trembling fingers and found a beautiful leather-bound sketchbook and a set of drawing pencils. She looked up at Tyler, her eyes swimming with tears. Tyler, this is too much. It is not nearly enough. I saw how happy you were when you were drawing the other day. I want you to keep doing that, to fill 100 sketchbooks if it makes you happy. He cupped her face gently. I want to give you all the things you were denied, Tessa. Not just safety and a home, but joy and freedom and the chance to be whoever you want to be. Tessa set the sketchbook carefully on the table and then threw her good arm around Tyler's neck, pulling him down to kiss her. This kiss was different from the one in the church, deeper and more urgent, full of all the emotion she could not find words for. Tyler responded immediately, his arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close but still being careful of her injuries. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Tyler rested his forehead against hers. "We do not have to rush anything," he said quietly. "I know you have been through a lot, and I do not want to push you into anything you are not ready for. We can take this as slow as you need." Tessa appreciated his consideration, the way he was always thinking of her comfort and well-being. But she also knew what she wanted, and what she wanted was him. "I am ready," she said softly. "I want to be your wife in every way, Tyler. I want this to be real." The look Tyler gave her was so full of love and desire that it made her knees weak. "Are you sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." Tyler kissed her again, softer this time, and then he took her hand and led her to the bed that was now theirs to share. He was gentle with her, mindful of her broken arm and her ribs, but also passionate in a way that made Tessa understand for the first time what it meant to truly be with someone. Frank's ugly advances had made her fear this kind of intimacy, but with Tyler, it was completely different. He made her feel cherished and desired and beautiful, and when he whispered that he loved her, she knew it was the truth. Afterward, they lay tangled together under the blankets, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Tessa rested her head on Tyler's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling more content than she had ever felt in her life. "I love you," she said quietly, the words coming easily now. "I know it is fast, but I do. I love you, Tyler Northwood." "I love you too, Tessa Northwood," Tyler said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret saying yes to me." "I could never regret it. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Tyler corrected gently. "I was so lonely before you came, Tessa. I did not even realize how lonely until you were here, and suddenly this cabin felt like a home instead of just a place to sleep. You gave me something to work for, someone to care for. You gave me purpose." They fell asleep, wrapped in each other's arms, and for the first time since her mother died, Tessa slept without nightmares. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and as the snow melted and the world turned green again, Tessa healed. The stitches came out of her head, leaving a small scar that her hair mostly covered. Her ribs stopped aching, and finally, after 6 long weeks, Tyler removed the splint from her arm. It was weak and stiff at first, but with exercises and time, it grew stronger. Tessa threw herself into life on the ranch with enthusiasm. Tyler taught her to ride, patient and encouraging as she learned to control the gentle mare he had chosen for her. She learned to feed the chickens and collect eggs, to milk the cow, to tend the small vegetable garden Tyler had planted. She learned about horses, too, watching with fascination as Tyler worked with the young ones, teaching them to accept a saddle and bridle, to respond to commands. He was gifted with animals, she realized, with an instinctive understanding of what they needed and how to communicate with them. In the evenings, after the work was done, Tessa would draw while Tyler read or worked on mending tack. Sometimes they would talk for hours, sharing more of their pasts, making plans for their future. And Adirsin, Tyler wanted to expand the ranch, to breed and train horses that would be known throughout Colorado for their quality. Tessa suggested they could also take in injured or mistreated animals, give them a place to heal and recover before finding them new homes. Tyler loved the idea, and they began to dream together of what their ranch could become. They saw Frank only once more, when Tessa and Tyler were in town buying supplies in early April. He was coming out of his feed store as they were passing, and he stopped dead when he saw Tessa. She held Tyler's hand tighter, her heart racing, but she forced herself to meet Frank's eyes steadily. "Tessa," Frank said, his voice oily with false concern, "I have been so worried about you. I am glad to see you are well." "No thanks to you," Tessa said, her voice steady, despite her pounding heart. "You left me to die, Frank. The only reason I am standing here is because Tyler found me and saved my life." Frank's face darkened. You are being dramatic. I merely thought you needed some time to cool off after your tantrum. I was coming back for you. You are a liar, Tyler said flatly, stepping slightly in front of Tessa. I saw what you did to her. The broken bones, the stitches, the bruises. That was not discipline or cooling off. That was attempted murder. Watch your mouth, boy. You do not know what you are talking about. I know exactly what I am talking about. And if you ever come near my wife again, if you so much as look at her wrong, I will make sure everyone in this town knows exactly what kind of man you really are. Tyler's voice was low and dangerous. Stay away from us, Gardner. That is your only warning. Frank looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Tyler's face must have convinced him it was not worth it. He turned and stalked back into his store, slamming the door behind him. Tessa was shaking, and Tyler immediately pulled her into his arms. You are so brave, he murmured. I am so proud of you. I thought I would be more afraid, Tessa admitted. But with you here, I just felt angry. Angry that he hurt me. Angry that he tried to make me feel small and powerless. But I am not powerless anymore, am I? No, Tyler said, pulling back to look at her with fierce pride. You are strong and brave, and you have a husband who will stand with you against anything. You are never going to be powerless again. They finished their shopping and rode home, and Tessa felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She had faced Frank and had not crumbled. She had stood her ground with Tyler beside her, and she had won. Summer arrived in a blaze of wildflowers and warm sunshine. The ranch was thriving, with Tyler training a steady stream of horses for various ranchers and businessmen in the area. Word was spreading about his skill, and people were willing to pay good money for a horse trained by Tyler Northwood. Tessa's garden flourished, providing them with fresh vegetables, and she had started selling her drawings in town, small sketches of mountain landscapes and wildlife that people seemed eager to buy. They were happy, genuinely and completely happy, in a way that still sometimes surprised Tessa. She would catch herself smiling for no reason, or she would look at Tyler across the dinner table and feel a rush of love so intense it took her breath away. He seemed to feel the same way, always finding excuses to touch her, to pull her into his arms, to tell her he loved her. In late July, Tessa realized she had missed her monthly courses. At first, she thought it was just the stress of everything that had happened, but when another month passed, she began to suspect the truth. She waited until she was sure before telling Tyler, nervous about how he would react. They had never specifically talked about children, though she knew he liked them based on how he interacted with the kids in town. She told him one evening as they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset. Tyler, I need to tell you something. He looked at her with concern. What is wrong? Are you feeling all right? I am feeling fine. Better than fine, actually. She took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby. Tyler stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then a slow smile spread across his face, growing until it was so wide it looked like it might split his face in half. Truly? We are having a baby? Truly. I think I am about 2 months along, which means the baby should come in late February or early March. Tyler let out a whoop of joy and swept Tessa into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. When he set her down, there were tears in his eyes. I am going to be a father. We are going to have a family. Are you happy? Tessa asked, though the answer was obvious. Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am ecstatic. I am terrified. I am over the moon. He kissed her soundly. We are going to need to build more rooms onto the cabin and get a proper cradle. And I should probably learn more about babies because I do not know the first thing about taking care of one. We will figure it out together, Tessa said, laughing at his enthusiasm. We have months to prepare. Tyler sobered slightly, his hand moving to rest on her stomach. Thank you, he said quietly, for trusting me enough to build this life with me, for giving me a family when I thought I would always be alone. for being the best thing that ever happened to me. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Tessa said, covering his hand with hers. You gave me back my life, Tyler. You gave me hope and love and a future. I am the one who should be thanking you. Then we are even, Tyler said, kissing her forehead. And our child is going to be the luckiest baby in Colorado because he or she is going to have you as a mother. The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Tessa had some morning sickness in the early months, but Tyler was attentive and patient, bringing her tea and dry bread in the mornings, rubbing her back when she felt queasy. As her belly grew, he became even more protective, insisting she not overdo it, taking on more of the chores himself. Tessa protested at first, not wanting to be treated like she was fragile, but she eventually accepted his care for what it was, an expression of love and worry. Tyler threw himself into expanding the cabin, adding 2 more rooms with the help of a few men from town. One would be for the baby, and the other would be a proper bedroom for them, giving them more space and privacy. He built a beautiful cradle from pine wood, sanding it smooth and carving small horses into the sides. Tessa sewed tiny clothes and blankets, marveling at how small everything was. In December, when Tessa was 7 months along, they received word that Frank Gardner had died. He had been found in his home, apparently having suffered a heart attack. Tessa felt a complicated mix of emotions at the news. Relief, certainly, that he could never hurt her or anyone else again, but also a strange sort of sadness for the man he could have been if he had chosen differently. Are you all right? Tyler asked, holding her as they sat by the fire. I think so. It feels like the final page of a chapter I have been trying to close for a long time. He cannot hurt me anymore, cannot cast any shadow over our life. It is just us now. Our family. Our family, Tyler repeated, his hand resting on her rounded belly. I like the sound of that. The baby came early, arriving in mid-February, during a cold snap that left the world covered in fresh snow. Tessa's labor started in the middle of the night, and Tyler rode frantically through the dark to fetch the midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Henderson who had delivered half the babies in Georgetown. The labor was long and difficult, lasting well into the next evening, but finally, just as the sun was setting, their baby was born. It is a boy, Mrs. Henderson announced, placing the squalling, red-faced infant on Tessa's chest. A big, healthy boy. Tessa looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and dark hair, and the way his eyes squinted against the light, and felt love so profound it was almost painful. Tyler knelt beside the bed, his eyes wide with wonder, as he touched the baby's soft cheek. He is perfect, Tyler whispered. Absolutely perfect. Do you have a name picked out? Mrs. Henderson asked as she cleaned up. Tyler and Tessa looked at each other, and Tessa nodded. They had discussed this months ago. Thomas, Tyler said. His name is Thomas Northwood. Thomas was a good baby, healthy and strong, with his mother's dark hair and his father's sage-colored eyes. Tyler was a natural father, patient and gentle, spending hours holding his son and talking to him softly. Tessa would wake in the night to feed Thomas and find Tyler already there, having heard the baby fuss, ready to change him or rock him or just hold him so Tessa could rest. As winter turned to spring and Thomas grew from a tiny infant into a chubby, smiling baby, Tessa reflected on how much had changed in just over a year. She had gone from being broken and abandoned in the snow to being a wife and mother with a home and a future. She had gone from fear and hopelessness to love and joy, and it was all because Tyler had been riding that trail on that December evening, because he had stopped when he saw her, because he had refused to turn away. What are you thinking about? Tyler asked one evening as they sat on the porch, Thomas sleeping peacefully in Tessa's arms. About how lucky I am, about how much I love you, about how I cannot imagine my life being any different than it is right now. I think about that too, Tyler said, putting his arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. I think about how close I came to losing you before I ever found you. If I had ridden home a different way that day, If I had been even an hour later, you might not have made it. The thought terrifies me. But you did find me, and I did make it. And now we are here together, with our son, building the life we dreamed about. That is what matters. Tyler kissed the top of her head. You are right. I am going to spend less time worrying about what could have been, and more time being grateful for what is. The years rolled by in a pattern of seasons and hard work and deep contentment. Thomas grew into a bright, energetic boy who loved the horses as much as his father did. When he was 3, Tessa found out she was pregnant again, and in the spring of 1881, she gave birth to a daughter they named Lily. 2 years after that came another boy, James, completing their family. The ranch prospered beyond their wildest dreams. Tyler's reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout Colorado and beyond, and they had more work than they could handle. They hired help, young men looking for honest work, and Tyler trained them not just in horse handling, but in kindness and patience, the same lessons he taught his children. Tessa's drawings had also gained recognition, and she was commissioned to illustrate a book about Colorado wildlife, a project that took her 2 years and earned her a modest but meaningful income of her own. She loved the work, loved being able to contribute to their financial security while also pursuing something that brought her joy. But more than the success and the prosperity, what Tessa treasured most was the love that filled their home. Tyler was as devoted and attentive a husband as he had been from the beginning, never taking her for granted, always making time for her even with 3 young children and a busy ranch to run. He would bring her wildflowers for no reason, would pull her into his arms and dance with her in the kitchen while the children laughed, would hold her at night and tell her she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Tessa made sure their children knew they were loved unconditionally, something she had missed after her father died. She told them stories and encouraged their interests and made their home a place of laughter and warmth. She taught them to read and write, to draw and appreciate beauty, to be kind to those weaker than themselves. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Tyler surprised Tessa by taking her on a picnic to the spot where he had found her all those years ago. The place looked completely different in the summer sunshine, green and alive instead of white and deadly, but Tessa still recognized it. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked as they sat on a blanket, their children playing nearby in the grass. "Because this is where our story began," Tyler said, taking her hand. "This is where I found the greatest treasure of my life. I wanted to come back here and remember, to be grateful for the twist of fate that brought us together." Tessa leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been? If you had not found me, if you had not taken me in? All the time, and every time I thank God that I was on that trail that day, that I saw you, that I stopped, because everything good in my life flows from that moment." "Mine too," Tessa said softly. "You know, sometimes I feel guilty for being this happy. After everything I went through with Frank, after how dark things were, it feels almost wrong that I could end up with something this beautiful." "You do not have anything to feel guilty about," Tyler said firmly, turning to face her. "You survived something terrible, Tessa. You were strong enough to keep living even when you had every reason to give up. You deserve every bit of happiness we have built. More than that, you helped create it. This life we have, it is not just something I gave you. It is something we built together, with equal measure of work and hope and love." Tears stung Tessa's eyes. "I love you so much, Tyler Northwood. More than I could ever put into words." "I love you too, Tessa Northwood, and I am going to spend the rest of my days showing you just how much." They kissed as the sun shone warm on their faces, and their children's laughter rang out across the meadow. It was a perfect moment in a life full of perfect moments, and Tessa sent up a silent prayer of thanks for the cowboy who had saved her life and then given her a reason to truly live it. The children grew, and the ranch grew with them. Thomas turned out to have his father's gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and calm. Lily inherited her mother's artistic talent, filling sketchbook after sketchbook with drawings of everything around her. James was the adventurous one, always exploring, always asking questions, always getting into good-natured mischief. Tyler and Tessa expanded their operation to include the rescue work Tessa had suggested years ago, taking in horses that had been mistreated or abandoned and rehabilitating them. Some they kept, but most they found new homes for, carefully vetting potential owners to make sure the animals would be properly cared for. It was deeply satisfying work, giving back in a way that felt meaningful. When Thomas was 15, he asked his father about how his parents had met. Tyler and Tessa had told the children bits and pieces over the years, but never the full story. That evening, with all three children gathered around the fire, they told them everything about Frank and his cruelty, about being left in the snow, about Tyler finding Tessa and taking her in, about falling in love and building a life together. The children listened with wide eyes, and when the story was finished, Lily threw her arms around her mother. "That is the most romantic thing I have ever heard," she said. "Papa saved you like a prince in a fairy tale." "He did more than save me," Tessa said, looking at Tyler with eyes full of love. "He gave me a reason to believe in goodness again. He showed me what love was supposed to look like." "Your mother saved me too," Tyler added, pulling Tessa close. "I was lonely and lost before she came into my life. She gave me purpose and joy and a family. We saved each other." "That is what love should be," Tessa told her children. "Not one person rescuing the other, but both people choosing to stand together, to build something better than either could alone. That is what I want for all of you when you are old enough to think about marriage. Find someone who makes you braver and kinder and stronger. Find someone who sees the best in you and brings it out. Find someone worth fighting for." The children took those words to heart. Thomas grew up and married a rancher's daughter from Leadville, a strong, capable young woman who could ride and rope as well as any man. They built their own ranch not far from Tyler and Tessa, and Thomas became as skilled a trainer as his father. Lily married a teacher from Georgetown, a gentleman who encouraged her art and helped her open a small gallery in town where she sold her paintings and drawings. James joined the cavalry and served honorably, eventually settling in Denver, where he became a horse breeder of some renown. Tyler and Tessa grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with time and sun and wind. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew deeper and stronger with each passing year, roots sinking down into soil, enriched by shared experiences and overcome challenges. On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. As Tessa looked around at the full table, at the faces of the family she and Tyler had created, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude. She thought about the girl she had been at 19, broken and bleeding in the snow, and she marveled at how far she had come. After dinner, Tyler led her outside to the porch where they had spent countless evenings watching the sun set over the mountains. "Do you remember our first night here after we were married?" he asked, pulling her into his arms. "Of course I do. You carried me over the threshold and gave me that sketchbook. I was so nervous and so happy all at once." "I was terrified," Tyler admitted with a laugh. "I kept thinking you were going to realize you had made a mistake, that I was not good enough for you, that you deserved someone better. You were exactly what I needed. You are exactly what I need. Then now, always." Tyler cupped her face gently, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "You are the great love of my life, Tessa Northwood. The best decision I ever made was taking you in, and the second best was asking you to marry me. Everything good in my world stems from you." "And everything good in mine stems from you," Tessa said, rising on her toes to kiss him. "You were my salvation and my hope and my home. I would go through everything that happened with Frank all over again if I knew it would lead me here. To you. To this life." They stood together, as the sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, holding each other the way they had for 25 years, the way they would for however many years they had left. Around them, the ranch bustled with life and laughter, the sound of their grandchildren playing, of their children talking, of horses nickering in the corrals. It was the sound of family, of love, of a legacy built on the foundation of one man's kindness and one woman's courage. The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. Tyler and Tessa attended the weddings of their grandchildren, celebrated births and mourned losses, weathered illnesses and hard times together. Through it all, they remained each other's constant, each other's comfort, each other's greatest love. When Tessa was in her late 60s, she fell ill with pneumonia. For a terrifying week, Tyler sat by her bedside, holding her hand and refusing to leave, just as he had done all those years ago when he first brought her to his cabin. But Tessa was strong, and she fought her way back to health, driven by her determination not to leave Tyler alone. "You are not getting rid of me that easily," she told him when she was finally well enough to sit up. "I plan to be around for a long time yet." "Good," Tyler said, his voice rough with emotion, "because I am not ready to say goodbye. I am never going to be ready to say goodbye." They made it to their 40th anniversary, a milestone they celebrated quietly, just the two of them at the cabin that had grown and changed over the years, but was still fundamentally the same place where their love had bloomed. They talked about old times and new, about their children and grandchildren, about everything they had built together. "If you could go back and change anything, would you?" Tyler asked as they lay in bed that night, wrapped in each other's arms. "Not a single thing," Tessa said without hesitation. "Every moment, good and bad, led us here. I would not trade this life for anything." "Neither would I. You made me the man I am, Tessa. You taught me what it means to love and be loved. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Tessa corrected gently. "That is what makes it so special. We chose each other every day for 40 years. We keep choosing each other." "And I will keep choosing you for as long as I have breath in my body," Tyler promised, kissing her softly. Tyler passed away in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 73, with Tessa beside him. His heart simply stopped, worn out after a life of hard work and deep love. Tessa was devastated, feeling like half of herself had been torn away. But she took comfort in knowing that they had been given something precious and rare, a love that had lasted a lifetime, that had weathered every storm, that had created a legacy of kindness and compassion that would live on through their children and grandchildren. She lived another 5 years, spending her days surrounded by family, drawing and painting and telling stories about the cowboy who had saved her in the snow all those years ago. She made sure her grandchildren understood the importance of compassion, of not turning away from those in need, of standing up for what was right even when it was hard. When Tessa died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 76, her family buried her next to Tyler on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. On the headstone, Thomas carved the words his mother had requested. She was found, she was loved, she was cherished. Together forever. The ranch continued to thrive under Thomas's management, and then under his children's management, becoming known throughout Colorado not just for the quality of its horses, but for the kindness of its owners. The story of Tyler and Tessa became a family legend, passed down through generations, a reminder of the power of compassion and the enduring nature of true love. And on winter evenings, when the snow fell soft and white over the mountains, some said you could still see two figures walking hand in hand across the meadow, a tall cowboy and a dark-haired woman, together always, as they had promised each other that December day so long ago when one man stopped to help a stranger and found the love of his life. Their story became woven into the fabric of Georgetown itself, told in the saloons and churches and general stores. Young people would ask about the couple who had built the prosperous Northwood Ranch, and the old-timers would tell them about Tyler, who had found Tessa dying in the snow, about how he had nursed her back to health, about how they had fallen in love, and built something beautiful out of tragedy. It became a story parents told their children to teach them about kindness, about looking out for others, about how one act of compassion could ripple out through time and change countless lives. The cabin where it all began still stood on the ranch, preserved by Thomas and his descendants as a testament to where their family had started. Visitors would come to see it sometimes, would walk through the rooms and try to imagine what it had been like when Tyler brought Tessa there, broken and half frozen. They would see the bedroom where Thomas and Lily and James had been born, the kitchen where Tyler and Tessa had shared countless meals, the porch where they had sat watching sunsets and planning their future. But more than a place, more than a building, the cabin represented something deeper. It represented hope, the idea that even in your darkest moment, salvation might be riding toward you. It represented healing, the knowledge that wounds, both physical and emotional, could mend given time and care. Most of all, it represented love, the kind that was built on respect and partnership and choice, the kind that lasted through decades and difficulties and triumph. The legacy Tyler and Tessa left behind was not just the ranch or the horses or the family tree that spread across Colorado and beyond. It was the example they set of what marriage could be, what partnership looked like, how to treat others with dignity and compassion. It was in Thomas's patience with difficult horses, in Lily's art that celebrated the beauty of the natural world, in James's integrity as he conducted his business dealings. It was in their grandchildren who volunteered at the town's orphanage, who took in stray animals, who stood up for those being bullied or mistreated. Every Christmas, the Northwood family would gather at the ranch, sometimes numbering 50 or more people as the generations expanded. They would share a meal and exchange gifts and tell stories, and inevitably someone would ask for the story of how great-grandpa Tyler found great-grandma Tessa. The tale never got old, never lost its power to move people to tears and remind them of what mattered most in life. And so the story lived on, a bright thread running through the history of a family, a ranch, a town. It lived on in the kindness shown by strangers, in the love between couples who chose each other every day, in the understanding that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually doorways to our greatest blessings. It lived on in the knowledge that being saved and saving someone else were often the same thing, two sides of a single coin, two hearts beating in rhythm. Tyler and Tessa had started with nothing but each other, with love born from compassion and gratitude and genuine connection. From that simple beginning, they had built an empire not of wealth or power, but of love and family and purpose. They had proven that the wildness of the West could be tamed not through violence or domination, but through patience and kindness. They had shown that broken things could be made whole, that winter always gave way to spring, that love really could conquer all. Their love story became the stuff of legends, but it was a legend rooted in truth, in real people who had faced real challenges and chosen to meet them together. It was not a fairy tale where a prince swept in to rescue a damsel and they lived happily ever after without effort. It was better than that. It was two people who saved each other, who worked together to build happiness, who earned their happy ending through decades of choosing love every single day. And on those winter nights when the wind howled through the mountain passes and snow fell thick and fast, if you listened carefully, you might hear the echo of a story being told around warm fires throughout Georgetown. The story of a stepfather's cruelty and a winter's cold. The story of a cowboy riding home who saw something in the snow that made him stop. The story of wounds tended and trust earned and love discovered. The story of Tyler and Tessa Northwood, whose love had started in the depths of winter but had bloomed into an eternal spring, whose legacy would live on as long as there were people who believed in the power of compassion, the healing nature of love, and the truth that sometimes the coldest nights lead to the warmest dawns.